always lurk in the shadows as long as dark money, lies, and hate dominate politics. Yep, which the next line in that song. Suddenly it seems the American mainstream media has figured out that Donald Trump is a fascist, and they're talking about it. You know, a lot of commentators, including myself, have wondered out loud, what's going to happen to the Republican Party if Trump loses? Well, let's talk about that for a minute, because frankly, I believe that's what's going to happen. I mean, you know, God only knows, but that's what I believe is going to happen. I don't think, and I know I've said in the past that maybe that'll burst their bubble, and to some extent it might. I suspect that there will be a bit of a civil war in the Republican Party, but that said, it seems that most of the Republicans who might have a shred of integrity left have been flushed out of the party. And all you've got left are wimps and sycophants, people who are just terrified of Donald Trump, but not just Trump. They're terrified of the billionaires who are behind Trump. Keep in mind, the vast majority of Trump's funding is coming from a handful of right-wing billionaires, whereas the vast majority of Kamala Harris's funding is coming from donations from people like you and me, $100 donations. But, you know, we've had authoritarian politics in America before, shutting down newspapers and imprisoning publishers. And, you know, Jefferson put an end to that. Dan Sisson and I wrote a book about it, The American Revolution of 1800. You had the Confederacy. It was clearly a fascist movement. It was run and funded almost entirely by the wealthiest men in the South. Lincoln put an end to that. You had the Klan of the 1880s to the 1940s, another fascist movement. Senator Joe McCarthy's 1950s crusade wasn't just supported by American fascists, but he and his friends were actually getting money and support from German Nazis, actual German Nazis. Rachel Maddow blows that all up, tells that story. You know, basically we've handled these authoritarian movements. But, you know, Adams was defeated by Jefferson. Confederacy was defeated in the Civil War. The Klan lost popular support after World War II. Joe McCarthy was done in by Joseph Welch and Edward R. Murrow. But there are still some structural problems here, and it's really important to recognize them. 5 Republicans on the U.S. Supreme Court put a fascism-friendly time bomb into our body of constitutional law when Lewis Powell in 1978 wrote the decision in First National Bank versus Bellotti, saying that billionaires and corporate persons had a First Amendment right to pour money into politics because money into politics was the same thing as free speech. And then that crime was massively amplified when a different set of 5 Republicans on the Supreme Court doubled down on legalizing corruption and bribery with Citizens United in 2010. And as a result, today you've got a handful of American billionaires who are quite willing to fund Trump's fascist movement. And I think that they will fund any fascist movement. On top of that, you know, 6 corrupt Republicans on the Supreme Court itself have thrown in with Trump's fascist movement. Keep in mind, you know, there was the Anderson case before the Supreme Court year before last, which I think was probably the most consequential of the last couple of years. I get it, Dobbs was a big deal, but consider this. The Constitution says, and I quote, "No person shall hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state, who shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same or given aid and comfort to the enemies thereof." Donald Trump should not be on the ballot. He led an insurrection against the United States that, had it succeeded, would have overturned the 2020 election. You can't sugarcoat that. But the Supreme Court decided that, well, the Constitution doesn't say what it says. And finally, you know, we see all this evidence that Republicans are continuing in this fascist tradition with these smarmy, greasy Republican politicians like Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham and Mike Johnson and Chris Sununu going on TV every Sunday on the talk shows and Sunday politics shows and going, oh, yeah, we still support Donald. Oh, don't worry. Yes, maybe he's a fascist, but it's not that big a deal. You know, it's just weird stuff. Trump, you know, has a significant advantage here. He's a lifelong liar. He was trained, NBC spent millions to train him to do television. So he has kind of an advantage over other Republicans should there be an effort to replace him, and I think there will be if he loses this election. Almost certainly. I mean, he's not going to run for re-election in 4 years. So who's it going to be? I don't think there's anybody yet who has his level of willingness to lie and ability to cause people to believe his lies. But somebody, I guarantee you, somebody is going to step up and say, oh no, I'm the next Donald Trump, and they're going to do it with lies and fascism. Is it going to be Josh Hawley? Is it going to be Tom Cotton? Cruz? Who do you think is going to be the next fascist leader of the Republican Party? Or do you think that I'm wrong? Do you think that it's possible that regardless of Citizens United and the Supreme Court, that the fascist movement will die with Donald Trump? And what do we do about this? I mean, in the 40s, we dealt with fascists. Hollywood did, the Army did. We need to be speaking out loudly.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
I'll be right back with a crazy alert about Tucker Carlson and your calls. Stay tuned.